Hey, this is Brent Jensen. You're listening to No Sleep Till Sudbury, the show where we talk about the music that makes your skin vibrate. The show is brought to you by Pariah Pickups, handcrafted guitar pickups made with love down in Detroit, Rock City. Check them out at pariahpickups.com. The show is also brought to you by Fleming Properties. Now that the real estate market is heating up, you're going to want to call Steve. You can reach out to him at steve@flemingproperties.com or go to flemingproperties.com for details. All right. Today on the show, I am reunited with my old buddy, Mr. Stephen Stanley, is here at the house the 6th time on the show. I get into a bit of a scrape with him because I promised him a jacket for his 5th time on the show, and I came up empty. But we end up having a great chat nonetheless. His new album, Before the Collapse of the Hive, is out now, and it's killer. Here he is, Mr. Stephen Stanley. Wow, Stephen Stanley, you are back at my home.
Back in Brooklyn. I was originally banned from Brooklyn. Now I'm back in Brooklyn.
Banned from Brooklyn.
Yeah, it's good to be back here and good to see you again, Brent.
Thank you. I am so glad that you're back.
Yeah,
it means a lot because I know that you're not close.
This was a nice sort of passing through the general area arrangement we made, which is great. So
yes, perfect.
Yeah.
We're having a nice beer.
Yes.
And,
we won't divulge brands because no money has changed hands in the making of this podcast.
That's right. But people can guess.
People can guess. Yes. Send us your thoughts on what beer we're drinking right now.
So let's talk about your record.
Sure.
Yeah.
Seems like a good starting point.
So now it's fantastic, obviously.
Oh, thanks.
It came out November 9th.
November 10th was the release date. Yeah. Seems like a long time ago now.
Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of like catching up because you had gone through and done a lot of the press for it and a lot of the promotion, but you and I had tried to connect and we didn't, but here you are. So I'm a little bit behind.
Well, I think you're right on time because I think one of the things about making indie records is I think when you're on a major label, there's more of a thought that everything needs to happen at once. I'm really trying to approach this, and I think a lot of indie artists do the same thing, to have it be a sort of more of a slow burn. And, the success or failure of a record at this level is going to be with me connecting with people, mostly live, I would think. But anything that sort of can happen in stages along the way I think is a good way to approach it.
Now, I had heard a number of these songs previously, either in sound check or live, because you had played a number of these during your sets.
For sure.
And it was cool to hear them. I'd heard a couple demos too, and we'll get to the songs, but I think they turned out fantastic.
Thanks. I'm very happy with the record, and I think, well, let's go back to the last record, Jimmy and the Moon, and I hadn't listened to it in a long, long time. It came out in 2018, and I went back and heard a few songs. I think I was learning something. I had to relearn a song that I hadn't played in a while.
Mm.
And I realized, listening to a few of them, that, I like the way, I understand the way Bob Dylan thought of making records, that it was a document of that song at that moment in time. And then you take it away from that album and play it live as many times as you play it, and it tends to change.
Mm-hmm.
And so up until you record it, it's becoming whatever it is that you're going to record. And then I think this time around, just the whole sort of feel of the record was different than the last one. The way things sound, the way the drums sound, the way everybody plays. And the arrangements, I think, were just different. Maybe a little tighter or something. I don't know what it was. We also tried to play with dynamics. So the last record I felt was really kind of not one tempo, but one sort of density all the way through. Yeah. And I wanted this album to have more sort of rises and falls to it. And we did that very intentionally. So there were songs that we pulled the drums out of completely, and like The Owls, just acoustic guitar with a little bit of piano and vocal. So yeah, I wanted it to sort of have a little more rise and fall to it. And I think that was successful for sure. Mm-hmm. I think whatever happened in the studio usually isn't completely intentional, but there was a sound that is cohesive amongst all these songs, which I'm really happy about. And yeah, so, it's the other thing that was interesting about this record was that there were probably 4 or 5 songs that really, because of the pandemic, the band hadn't played that much. And so they were more studio creations than we've ever done before. And that was a lot of fun too.
Right. And those would have been the ones that I did not hear,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah. There was stuff that was written after, I mean, literally we were together for the last shows we did before the pandemic, our little three gig run in Muskoka. And yes, some of the songs that are on this record were certainly, and I think there was enough songs then to make a record, and the plan would have been to have started it fairly soon after that, which was 2019. It was like January 2019, February 2019.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or March, maybe.
March
2019.
That's right.
Yeah. And we would have probably like that spring gone and started the record, and then everything shut down and we didn't get to it for another year.
Oh, was it 19 or 20?
Was it 20?
Yeah, I think it was 20, wasn't it?
Was that the first year of the pandemic?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we're going to have some, we need a research department to figure out all this stuff. Whatever it was, we would have gone in, the plan was to go in that spring and start working on an album. Right. And there was enough songs to make a record. But I think what happened was a few of them got bumped off and others got added on. So that's, we recorded 13, we put 11 on the record. The other two, which I think are both really good too, will come out at some point on an EP. We'll do something else like that. So, but yeah, I think there was just even though it took us a long time to do because of two. So everybody knows we recorded on Wolf Island, and I was living in Toronto at the time, so going back and forth was one part of it. But also the pandemic stopped us in our tracks. Once for 9 months, once for another 7 months, I think, where we couldn't go to the island at all because of quarantines. So yeah, it took a while, but I think what happened in that while is something that I feel is quite different than the album that preceded it. So I like that.
Which is good.
Yeah.
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 I think you're right about that. And I think that it's quite a different record from Jimmy and the Moon.
That's great. That's all I want to know.
Yeah.
It's been a great talking to y'all today.
All right. Good night, everybody. No, when I hear it, and I love Jimmy and the Moon, obviously, you know that, but I love the Owl, and there's this is a fantastic record. I think it's completely different. And the thing that immediately comes to my mind when I think about it is I think that you're a storyteller. The musicianship is great, but it doesn't attach itself to any kind of one trend or sound or genre, but there's that element of rootsiness.
Yes.
That slightly Americana and rock, and they're combining to do something new.
I appreciate that, because that's the hardest question that I'm ever asked is, what style of music do you play? I don't know. Our publicist on Jimmy and the Moon immediately ascribed it to Americana, and I was like, oh. I said, are you sure you think that'll fly? And she goes, yeah, and she was right. Like, she got us such good press especially in Europe, based on that. And that's not even something that I'd really thought before. I really don't know what I thought that it is. And I'm still not sure if I know what it is. My answer usually ends up being singer-songwriter, because to me that invokes storytelling. Mm-hmm. And that's what's most important to me, is that in some way, whether it's something only I relate to or something that's more universal that everybody can understand directly, I think I can't really put a song forward until I feel like there's a lyrical story there.
Oh, and that's one of the great things about Stephen Stanley's music, is that, the cleverness and the storytelling. But it's distinctive in that way. And that's definitely something to hang your hat on, I think. These are great stories. And I think about things like The Minor Bird, and going back, and you would tell that story about your grandfather.
Yeah.
And that's cool. Like, that's an added dimension of enjoyment when you listen to not just this, but music in general.
Yeah. And that song really, I think, proves the theory that I was trying to put forward before, which is that from the recording to what that song is now is a whole different thing. And it just has really grown with the band and with me as something that, I think when it was my uncle that told me the story about my grandfather working in the sporting goods store underneath the Minor Bird. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. And and it instantly sort of suggested to me that there was some kind of possibility of a song there. But over time, it's become even more important as sort of a connection to family, and something that I think, I've jokingly said on stage that I credit my grandfather working in a sporting goods store underneath Neil Young and Rick James playing music is why I'm a musician. And obviously there's very little truth to that, but I think there's something about that I am very connected to about him being there when that scene was going down, and what I do, you know, what I've done in Toronto for years, and now I'm out of Toronto now, but what the city means to me as sort of a musical staging ground, and where most of my stories come from. So it's become so much more important to me, and consequently so much more a centerpiece in the live show or any kind of show I do. It's just a go-to song. It's a real fun one to play, and I think people really dig the story. Like it's a cool story.
Oh, it's accessible. There's an accessibility to it, right? It's like, you know, the owl. You name check Woodbine, which I love. You know, it's not somebody talking about Los Angeles. It's like, this is where I live and this is what I'm about.
Yeah.
And that's cool.
It's so funny because like what you just said is probably written by somebody who lived near that place too. And I think I've always had, and I think this may be sort of I don't want to get into cliches, but it may be sort of a Canadian mindset to be a little bit embarrassed of who we are and a little bit lacking confidence about who we are. But I'm trying to see stuff like that now when I write from the point of view of people outside of my realm hearing it and just hearing it as a reference to, oh, maybe I should check into what that, look that up and see what that is. For me, it's also familiar. And I think it was when I decided to, I don't even know if it was a conscious decision, but I decided to kind of embrace writing stuff that was very close to me and not trying to find something that I probably couldn't relate to myself to write about, that all of a sudden it became easier and I became more prolific. Because, you know, I mean, like I love that. If I'm like, you know, like today, for instance, when I'm driving back to Wolf Island, there's always thoughts in my mind. There's one an idea I have right now that came out of a couple weeks ago now. I went to Prince Edward County, and this woman named Annalise Nohora started a original music open stage at Base 31. And a guy named Ben Wright got up and played a song that he was a young songwriter, but a damn good one. He got up and played a song about his parents getting caught up in a very sort of ultra-right Christian church when he was young, and distinctly remembering them going to a event where they took their entire record collection and burned it. And he writes about it in this song so poignantly and describes the artists that were on fire and the albums that were on fire. And it was like, wow, they were pretty cool people that got caught up in some real heavy shit that took them in a whole different direction. Right. And he seems abhorred by that, what he went through as a child. But it gave me an idea for something that I experienced when I was a kid that is like, and I just haven't sat down with a guitar yet to try to find what the sequence of it is, but it's there. And I love that, having those ideas swirling around in your head that are stories that, you know, nobody else knows because it happened to me.
Right.
So,
yeah. And as a fan and as a listener, that intrigues me. If I didn't know what Woodbine was, for example, I would want to find out about it, as opposed to, you know, hearing a guy from Michigan sing about Hollywood Nights, for example, right?
Yes.
Like Bob Seger. Like, it just kind of, all right, I get the whole Sunset Strip thing and all that. But when people talk about their immediate surroundings,
their backyard, yeah. And like I said, like I think for someone who grew up in Ontario with a bit of an inferiority complex, things like that are like, oh, really? Should I put that in the song? Because it just seems like it's just so average, but it's awesome. I think it's great now.
Oh, I do too. You're right. That's kind of a slippery slope because people say nobody really cares about that. But then you think about right? People like Neil Young mentioning Blind River or The Hip, talking about Sault Ste. Marie and like, you know,
look at the emotion that one line draws out of people there. Well, there's that one, but I'm thinking of There Is a Town in North Ontario.
Oh yeah.
Like anybody who grew up in Ontario or in Canada that's been to the Muskoka area, that immediately, and it's not even Muskoka, there's a whole bunch of North Ontario you can talk about, but it just immediately evokes an image. And it just, was that very intentional? Was it just, he was just writing what he knew? You know, there's a quote in Shaky, and I'm not going to be able to give it to you directly, but it was basically the worst thing a songwriter can ever do is succumb to the pressures of somebody trying to affect how you write. So basically meaning if you write something that maybe, that may sort of rankle somebody, you shouldn't, it's not your job to take that out. It's sort of, that's your job as the songwriter, as the writer, is to let that stuff happen. And, I guess beg forgiveness later if need be. But I think the minute you get into a situation where you're editorializing too much, you're probably sunk.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I started years and years ago as a writer, trying to be too precious about what I was saying. And, if you go back to like 1986, when I was in Popular Front, that was the band that led to Lowest of the Low. The three of the main people from Lowest of the Low in the early incarnations were in Popular Front. And I think the only huge difference, and then probably the reason that band never really felt like in our hearts like it was like the thing we were going to do forever, was that thematically the songs were being written were about very sort of macro, global, big world viewpoints. I think, and in that, obviously some people have had great success doing that. I think for me, and I think for Ron Hawkins too, it was really important to sort of bring it back into your own purview, your own field of vision. And then, and then it became real. It became something that people could relate to. I think the best thing about songwriting is like you can write something that means something very specific to you. And, like that scene in the John Lennon documentary where the guy shows up at his door saying, "Why did you write all these songs about me?" And so, I had to meet you because you wrote all these songs about me. And Lennon goes, "How could that be, man? I've just met you for the first time. Like I don't know who you are. How could I possibly? No, well, I don't know, but you've written all these songs about me." And like, obviously that's extreme, but I think one thing that the pandemic has produced is this reinvigorated discussion of how important music and art is in all of our lives. And that, to me, obviously a catchy beat or a catchy tune is up there with the most important parts of the music business, but it's usually thematics and lyrics that people, lean into and say, this is why this one means so much to me. So yeah.
Especially when we were kids, right? I just had this conversation. We talked a little bit about this before we get started today, that I always say that you love the art that you do because you see yourself inside it a little bit, right? And especially when you're a kid, you remember those songs. And that's a funny John Lennon story because in the talk that I give, I talk about Bon Jovi, "Me Must Have Been Following Me Around." That's about me. Like, that's my song. And you take these with you as personal totems and commemorations of your youth, which means a lot to you, through the rest of your life. And they become so personal.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, we if you grew up in North America, the idea of kids of the same age and the same generation having shared experiences that are completely unrelated is very possible. I mean, we were all kind of doing the same things.
Yeah.
You went to school, you had a part-time job, and on the weekends you were probably partying or playing guitar or something. And it's like, it's not anybody, from my point of view, anybody that writes about something happening on a lake in Algonquin Park, it's like, oh yeah, I could totally relate to that.
Right.
It's like, it's right there. It's like that experience is right there.
Mm-hmm.
And if you keep kind of, living a good life, you're probably creating all new experiences. And that's, so I kind of like try to strike a balance between writing about stuff that has just happened and stuff that's like from the distant past. I could probably do 2 albums worth of stuff just of stories from my youth.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's nice to sprinkle those in. I think it might get a little bit, what is this, like a revival show if all we're talking about is Stephen Stanley when he was 12?
Well, I think that, that there's a relation point there, I think, for people. I know what you mean about redux and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I think that's valuable to a lot of people. I think that people like to go back, and nostalgia is a very important thing. Yeah. On this record, Hornets is like that, right?
That's a throwback song. Yeah, that's about
for sure.
Yeah.
Let's go through these actually, because like I just want to hear your perspective. You and I would talk during the recording of this, and before the recording, we did that thing, up north, and I felt like I was pretty close to this, and I had some really good times, and I thank you for that.
Yeah. Likewise.
COVID kind of, for me, broke that up a little bit.
For so many of us, yeah, totally did.
So Chase That Devil kicks the record off.
So Chase That Devil's cool because from our relationship, it was the you heard the first time it was ever played at a sound check.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, which I think was probably in Muskoka.
I think so.
Was it in Muskoka or was it before that?
It might have been before that, actually. You know where it was? It was on Queen Street. It was not the Horseshoe, but the Rivoli.
Yes.
I think it was the Rivoli.
And we didn't play it live that night because we were just learning it. But yeah, we did a little bit, or maybe it was just me that did a bit of it in soundcheck.
Yeah.
And at that point, I wasn't even sure yet. I wasn't even sure. And it really became like a nice sort of centerpiece for the band as a live song. And I liked, it made total sense to lead the album off with it.
Mm-hmm.
I love the recording of it. And I think it really shows, especially between Chris Bennett and I, where our guitar playing has meshed so nicely together. I think there's such nice stuff on this song that's just so great. Yeah, and it's like almost the whole cast of characters that plays on the record is on this song, save for a couple vocalists. But yeah, it's a real favorite of mine, and definitely a live favorite too. Mm-hmm. And when you heard it, it was just like it sort of has that really high chorus, and I wasn't even sure if it worked yet. I was just like, sound checks are amazing because you work on a song in wherever it is in your house, and you have some perspective on how it's going to work. But when you get on a microphone in a room,
right, and
can actually play it, it really gives you a sense of how much power there is there. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, that's always fun to do that. That happens all the time, where playing a song for the first time in soundcheck really sort of solidifies the idea of going and finishing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
How about The Winnipeg Gun? Was a song I was definitely not familiar with. I don't know when that was written.
That one came along during the pandemic for sure. And that's the story of when I was a kid, and my family always went to Winnipeg in the summer. My mom was from there, and her cousin and her cousin's family were all kind of the same age as my brother and sister and I, and we spent a lot of summers there. And this is a very specific story that my mom claims never happened, but it really did happen.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's just a story of one of my mom's cousin's son, who was older than I was, and was not really I don't think he was living my mom's cousin's brother, not son. Mm-hmm. And he was, he was sort of like coming in and out of the picture. He wasn't always around, but one day he showed up in his convertible, and I think his girlfriend was in the front seat, and she jumped in the back seat, and he said, hop in, and we kind of went driving through the streets of Winnipeg. And at some point he said, open the glove compartment and look what's in there. And I opened it up, and there was like a pearl-handled revolver, and I was like, wow. He goes, yeah, pick it up. And I'm like, well, I don't know if I don't really want to, but it's like, and then I remember saying to him, like, what, like, why do you have a gun? Like,
right.
What are you expecting is going to happen? And being very perplexed by that and not really getting an answer. And my mom said, well, that didn't happen. You're just imagining that. And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm sure that's what he'd want you to believe, but
yeah.
Anyways, there was never any answers to the questions. Like, I don't know what the story was, but okay, so maybe it was like a fever dream I had and didn't exist.
I was just thinking a fever dream, but there's no way.
It's pretty real to me. I remember it very well.
How old would you have been during that time?
Yeah, I was probably like maybe maximum 13 or something.
Okay,
like that.
So yeah, that wasn't an imagination.
No,
it wasn't like you were 4 and you just kind of filled in the gaps. Wow.
Yeah,
that's very interesting.
Yeah, it was just one of those things. Like, just I happened to be at a moment in time, and this happened, and I couldn't even tell you why this story popped back into my head.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah, but this is one where the idea for the lyrics was far before the music. Like, so whatever reason this story came back to me, the music was built around the words.
Mm-hmm. Straw Man is another song, I believe, that was written during the pandemic.
Yes.
And that features the very lovely Kate Fenner.
Yeah.
The Yield by Kate Fenner.
Yeah, it's amazing.
That song just takes me apart. It's unbelievable. She is so tremendous.
She's fantastic. And she recorded this vocal in New York City, and I was not there for that.
Oh.
And When I first heard it, it was just, it reduced me to tears. Like she just, like, I'd sung her parts in sort of a scratch vocal to give her an idea of where they would be placed and what the words were. And she had words and I had notes so she could know which line I wanted her to come in on and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it was all her interpretation, all the extra harmonies and everything was all her. And like, I think she's probably as close to a flawless singer as anybody I've ever heard or met. Like, she's just fantastic. And her take on this is brilliant. So
she's amazing. Yeah.
I did know writing this that the best case scenario would be that she would sing this part.
Oh, really?
So that was cool.
Wow.
She, obviously I've done some shows with Kate. I know her quite well. And she had sung on Jimmy and the Moon a little bit on California. I don't know that this was an extension of that. I just, when I was writing this, it just sort of felt like this was a part that she would be perfect for.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was really nice.
Wow. Was she around on Wolf Island at all?
Have I seen her on Wolf Island? Briefly. We did a show in Toronto in December. Mm-hmm. She was at that. And when did I see her before that? Yeah, I mean, like she and Chris Brown still do a lot of playing music together. So she's there on occasion. Her son loves the island, so she's there on occasion for that. But yeah, she lives in New York City, so she's not often there, but I see her maybe 2 or 3 times a year, which is lovely. And we usually end up doing a song or two when that happens. So when was the last we played together twice this year or last year, and I'm trying to think when the other one was. I'm drawing a blank. Oh, when we did the BHS tour, she did the Toronto show with us.
Right.
Yeah,
that's right. You're No Exception this is a little hit in my opinion. I think this is yeah, you definitely hear this on the radio.
It's people tell me it's catchy, so that's cool.
It's super catchy. Yeah, I like this.
Yeah,
quite a lot. I had never heard this before either.
Yeah, this one came along during the pandemic too. This was kind of about the pandemic, or about the reaction to the pandemic anyways.
Great tune.
Yeah, so this was one of the ones where, I think when we play it live, we do more of a traditional band arrangement of it that has full drums and bass, but we really peeled it back, and I was trying to make it into, almost imagining something Stephen Stills was arranging, where it was just mostly guitars first and lots of vocals. The vocals ended up becoming a little more gang vocals than sort of Sublime Harmony vocals, but I kind of like it. It's got a rough quality to it, and I think the urgency matches the lyrics nicely.
You saw my face when you said that. When I heard this song, I actually said there's some CSN in here.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And that's where the rootsiness comes from. Right?
Yeah.
The Jayhawks feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I thought this was like Crosby, Stills, Nash stuff.
Yeah.
It's got that feel. And that's what I love about this music, is that it's a nod to that time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Without kind of, full on.
Yeah. And I think that's part of, it was funny because some of my younger friends, when they hear new stuff from me, they're like, wow, that sounds so 90s. And I'm always like, define what that means. What does that mean? Because I don't know. I mean, obviously my formative years in music were in the 90s. I was doing 250 shows a year, but I don't know what that means in the grand scheme of things. Like, what's different about this than something that is of this style that was, done by Jason Isbell or something, and I don't know the answer to that, but it might just be in how it's constructed or something,
or maybe just perception. Yeah. I don't hear that at all, and that's funny because that would be the last thing that I would say.
Yeah. I don't really know, but it's something that I hear often enough to think that there's some truth to it, because I think somebody that wasn't of an age to be experiencing the 90s music scene, that is listening to 90s music, would have a very different take on it than somebody that was there, right? So
that's a very good point. Yeah. Now, Here Comes That Rain is a particularly fond song for me, just because I remember when you opened up for 5440 here in Oshawa.
Yeah.
That night was ruined by a snowstorm.
Oh boy, that storm.
We were supposed to have a big party.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Oh yeah, we were supposed to come back here, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And everybody was so stoked. The neighbors were there. Like everybody was so pumped up. And the huge storm snowed everybody in. My car was there overnight. Couldn't get it. Anyway.
You all got tickets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you opened with this opening for 5440.
Oh, cool.
And you stormed the stage literally. So it was a moment. And I can see that in my mind right now.
Oh, cool.
And I just thought, wow. And the crowd responded immediately.
Yeah. Well, the nice thing about shows in Canada is like snowstorms don't usually deter people from going. And we spent the whole day thinking this is either going to be canceled or nobody's going to show up. And it wasn't our show. Obviously, we were opening for 5440, but I'd be surprised if there was one person that didn't come. The place was packed.
It was.
And it was as bad as it gets outside that day. Mm-hmm. Like, we didn't even know if we would get there, first of all.
That's right.
And when we did, we didn't know if we would get the cars out at the end because we were so plowed in. It was just, and then, by the time the night rolled around, we ended up driving back to Toronto afterwards, and that was messy, but not as messy as it had been earlier in the day. But yeah, I remember playing in Buffalo with Lowest of the Low, and I don't know, it was the second time around. I think it was probably like in 2001 or 2 at a club that was in Tonawanda, so sort of on the outskirts of Buffalo. And Buffalo, as we know, can potentially get so much snow, feet and feet of it. And this particular day was just like, it was piled high and it was coming down hard. And we sort of all thought, this is going to be a disaster tonight. Like, who would possibly leave their house? And I don't think one ticket wasn't used. It was just packed. It was almost like, no, this is where we live, and this is how it is, and it's not going to stop us from doing, and hopefully everybody got home safe. And but it's when stuff like that happens, it seems to heighten the communal vibe inside, right? Like, it just everybody's
true.
Like, yeah, we're here together, and then that didn't stop us. So
that's a good point. Yeah. It
was definitely the case that night in Oshawa too. It was a real blast of a night, and and hanging out in the crowd afterwards and talking to everybody and watching 5440 put on a great show too. Until we got outside and had to try to get our cars out, it was all great.
Oh, and next we have, I'll say it's my favorite tune on the record.
Oh, cool.
The Owl.
The Owl.
We've talked extensively about this, and I always go back to the Needle and the Damage Done reference because it's just very spare. Oh, there's just such a sentimentality, just even in the playing before your vocal comes in. We'll talk about the subject matter, but what a fantastic! I'm kind of stuck for words. It's an amazing song. It truly is.
No, thanks.
Yeah,
I'm very, very proud of it, and it came out of something called the Acoustic Guitar Project, where you can look that up online, but it's a music sort of, I won't say competition, but you're given a specific guitar for a week, and by Saturday you need to deliver a newly written and recorded song.
Wow.
And it was a lovely week because I basically would pick up the guitar every day and just sort of got to know it and play it, and started to really sort of suggest that whatever I was going to do on it, because it had a real easy, loose action on it. I mean, there were light strings. It was really sort of low action, and it just felt like it was something that needed to be finger-picked. So Thursday night, I remember sitting down at the dining room table and wrote most of the song, and just experienced the loss of a really close friend, and it became the subject matter. It was like the day it happened sort of informed this, along with something that happened a little later on where his entire vinyl record collection was put on sale, and the proceeds all went to Music Counts, which was near and dear to his heart. So those two things sort of informed the story, and it all kind of happened pretty quickly. And then as the rules dictated, by Saturday I had a fully recorded song. So
I remember you telling me about that before I heard The Owl. And you said, I'm a part of this thing and I have to write the song. And I'm like, it'd be interesting to hear what the song is. And then I heard it and I was like, you're like a magician. I don't know about that, but it's like conjured up this song.
I really like I don't know, with songwriting is like, it's such a non-deadline oriented concept that when you're given one with a deadline, I mean, I suspect it would just be as easily, it could have happened that, like, I'm a really harsh critic of myself. I won't, like, there's lots of ideas that I'll follow for a certain amount of time and then just abandon. And, I have little recordings of all this stuff and probably like 4 albums worth of songs that aren't completely finished. But there really has to be something that digs into my heart and soul before I'll take it to the full, to completion, basically. Mm-hmm. So this one, I mean, I think there's a lot of luck involved that it would happen in that way, but I guess there's a part of it's like understanding. You get to a certain point where you understand, well, obviously I know how to write a song, so I have to give them something by Saturday, or I'm giving back the guitar empty-handed, and they're going to be like, well, what? This is not what was supposed to happen. So, anyway, so with them, you've recorded it and you send it in, and then I never heard anything again. It wasn't until I started playing it live that I started to realize that this is really resonating with a lot of people. And, I have a few friends that like still, send me regular notes about how much they love this song and how much it means to them. So that's really cool.
It's a special song, truly. Yeah. Now, the next song, The Ballad of Lou Room, has a very interesting device in it that I remember hearing this for the first time also at the Rivoli, actually. Yeah.
I think we would have played it live.
You did.
That one came along a little bit sooner. Yeah.
And it kind of surprised me because as it goes, like at the very beginning, there's a series of hand claps.
Yeah.
And so the guys in the band, Benny just stopped playing and started clapping his hands. And I'm like, what is he doing? But I was like, what is this song? I've never heard this before. So it's really cool.
Again, I wish I knew how that idea, I don't know. I don't know where it came from.
I was going to ask
why it made sense.
Whose idea was this? It's just cool. It sounds like the drum beat from Ramblin' Gambling Man with those hand claps on top of it. That's what I mean about, the combination of roots and rock and combining in new ways.
This one, I think, fits that bill for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who produced the record as well always brings some nice flavor to every song especially that's the Hammond B3, and he's just a master at it. But this is a true story. This was from 2018 in London, England, and we were touring with a guy from Indiana named David Corley. He was having some health issues, and it was a heat wave in London, like I've never felt a heat wave. It was just oppressive heat. And and like in Europe, there's not many places you can walk into where there's actually air conditioning on. So we were basically like just hot all day and all night. The place we stayed in wasn't air conditioned. So he had arrived in London a day after us and had a bit of a sort of meltdown on the tube. And this woman named Lou Room noticed that he was having trouble and sort of stayed with him till he was recomposed, and then like got in a taxi with him and took an hour ride across town to bring him to where we were. And but we were staying in this little tiny flat. I'm not really sure what part of London it was in. It was whatever it was. We were playing in Camden Town, and we were about an hour and a quarter by Uber from Camden Town. So it was a long way. He gets out of the cab, and then this woman gets out, and I'm like, because he was staying with Chris and I was like, oh my God, like David, like you should have told us you were bringing somebody, because like we barely have enough space for you, right, let alone the two of you. And then I heard the whole story, and so that was she was just she was his guardian angel, not his girlfriend. Well, that would have been a good line.
There you go. See? Rewrite.
Let's go back to the studio.
All right. Speaking of good lines, this is a great line in this next song, No Love Lost. It's no love lost, just lost love.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. It's funny because like it sort of, when that line appeared in my mind, I sort of thought it would be like a real sort of soul song, and it ended up being more of, well, I think what it ended up being for me anyways was like trying to emulate something Pete Townsend would have written.
Oh.
And I don't know if that's, I've said that a few times playing it live, and I think it's just kind of lost on people because it maybe doesn't feel that way. But I think what I mean by it is like those sort of like a quick one or something like that, where there's like 3 songs in one.
Yeah.
Like it's got the first movement, then the bridge to me is a whole separate song, and then the extra is a whole separate song.
Yeah.
So, and they all kind of work together. So I liked it from that point of view.
Interesting insight.
And if you listen closely in the bridge, we did as best we could to steal the exact keyboard sound from Bargain on Who's Next.
No.
And it was just like, we didn't like sample it or anything. We just like tried to come up with something that sounded a lot like it. And Chris Brown plays this part in the bridge that is Bargain-esque.
That's great.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Wow. Did you know that on the cover of Who's Next, only Pete Townsend peed?
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
The rest is rainwater collected in a film canister. He was the only guy who could pee.
Yeah. I had bad prostates or...
Keith Moon we're talking about.
Yeah, Keith Moon probably did by that point, yeah. Yikes.
Hornets.
We talked about it a little already, but yeah.
So this is a very interesting song because it's very plaintive and it's just like, so this is exactly what happened to me and my friend.
Yeah. Except for if you ever talk to my brother, he'll tell you that my version of the story is completely flawed because he and our friend Brian Stewart were also there and they both got stung four times each. For whatever reason, my mind remembered me and Johnny and that was it. And I got stung once and Johnny got stung like 19 times. So, but it's funny, this song started, when we started working on this song, it was really like Bob Dylan's Series of Dreams. It really drove.
Okay.
But then it kind of, I think when Chris Brown brought the idea of the sort of almost atonal piano into it, we went in a different direction with it. And Chris Bennett started playing something that was a little more ethereal, less driving. And it's nice. It just sort of like, as you hear, it kind of fades up out of No Love Lost. And I don't know, it's just like this dream in the middle of the record. It's just like it's not even really all there. It's just kind of floating past you. And then we get into the next song, which is really sort of more direct and heavy.
This is so great because now I'm going to listen to this record in a new way, you know? And I was having this conversation a little while ago with somebody about, well, you and I talked about it upstairs, but having other aspects of a recording to kind of weigh against the actual listen, you know, like the gatefold sleeve or a story that you know about the song. And it just kind of like really kind of manipulates your perception in a good way, or it broadens it.
It might be a little unfair too, because it's, you know, it's like, it's very much how I see it. And that may be less relevant to some people. And, you know, I mean, I know because I did it, that's one thing, but other people may get something very, and I hope that's true that people get something very different about it. But, you know, it's funny, you just mentioned that about all the sort of ancillary things we have with us. Like that was lost a bit when the album gave way to the CD because of the smaller packaging, and completely lost when it all went digital. Right. But I remember, like, you know, it went up until when was it? Probably like 1989 when vinyl kind of went the way of the dodo. Mm-hmm. Like every listen, you'd have the album in front of you. I remember we were talking about Kiss before we went live with this, but Kiss Alive 2, sitting there with that gatefold on my lap and just looking at the photos and really sort of feeling like you were at the show, like you were getting all that. And it wasn't until some time later that I saw them live. And as I said to you, by the time I saw them, I felt like I knew too much about it, and there was no surprises. But yeah, it's like there was a very tactile experience to everything that was part of a record. That was part of the experience. So, you know, I mean, obviously there's lots of ways we were listening to tapes in cars and radio as well. But when you had an album, all the packaging and the lyrics and everything were so important to the listening experience.
Oh yeah. 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 I feel for kids these days because all that's lost. Hey Darlene.
Hey Darlene. We're shooting a video for Hey Darlene in early March. So
are you really?
There you go. Yeah.
Where? Downtown? Downtown,
yeah. In a coffee shop.
Oh wow. Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah, we tried to the director's a guy named Edward Pond, and who's an amazing filmmaker, and I'm so happy that we're gonna do something together. We talked about it a few times about how we were gonna do it, and then we just sort of started to lean into the idea that this song's about gossip. It's about people saying things about you that aren't true, and you're sort of forced to listen to them and try to gauge your reaction, which from my point of view is usually not to react except for writing a cryptic song about it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we're going to just sort of like the coffee shop is a place where people get together and tell stories.
Right.
So yeah,
That's perfect.
yeah, it's going to be cool.
That's in March?
It's in March. Yeah.
Cool.
I suspect it won't, once it's shot, I don't think it will take too long to get it out. So
Good. All right. I'll be looking for it.
yeah.
Last song, Holding Back on Someday.
Yeah. It's a real, this was later in the pandemic too. So,
Mm-hmm.
and hadn't been played live until we did the record release on December 1st in Toronto. It was the first time we played it live. Again, about my friend Dave Bookman, who died from an aneurysm quite suddenly, just before the pandemic, or a year before the pandemic. And just leading up to the last days of his life, because of a bunch of circumstances and something that got said about him in the press, his family kind of closed ranks and didn't want his friends to come and see him until the end was near. And then so this was like he died on a Monday, and three of us that were his closest friends went in and spent the day with him on Sunday. And this song's about that. It's just simply about that.
Mm-hmm.
What that felt like. And
Good way to close the record.
I think it was a good closing song. Yeah.
Yeah. And as I understand it, this album is dedicated to him, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a missing voice in my life for sure. And it's like, it was weird because, during Jimmy and the Moon, it was a constant conversation going with him about, he was like such a good sounding board and such a good friend and really kind of, I don't know, when you lose somebody close, and even though like we weren't close in the sense that we saw each other all the time, we saw each other occasionally, but we talked all the time, and that conversation just all of a sudden stops. It's very jarring,
Certainly it is, yeah. Well, congratulations, my friend. This is another triumph for the Stephen Stanley Band.
Another triumph for Triumph.
That's right.
I know that Triumph is like close to your heart. I know you have a good friendship with Rick Emmett. So
He's a good man.
yeah,
I
I've met him a couple times. He's a nice guy, a super nice guy.
I was just telling that story about him where, he's very sentimental, and we do the show at his house, as you know.
Yeah.
And so he really gets into the songs he's talking about, and sometimes he gets choked up.
Huh.
And so, his eyes get watery, and he this I think happened the third or fourth time I was there. And so when it was over, he kind of pushed the microphones aside and he leaned forward and like looked me right in the face. And I was like, what's he going to say? Right. And he says to me, Jensen, you come to my house every year, and every year you make me cry.
Oh.
Why do I continue to invite you to my house?
That's it. Band for life. Yeah, I've only met him, I guess, a couple times. I've only was in a conversation with him once, and it just struck me that he was actually unlike most rock stars because he was actually interested in what everybody in the circle of people was saying. It wasn't just about him by any means. It was really nice to talk with him. He just seemed like a real down to earth guy.
He truly is. He's a he's a quality person. He's a nice guy. He's a good guy. He's a thoughtful guy.
One hell of a guitar player.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Yeah. Well, how's your beer?
It's almost, the castle lights are growing dim.
Uh-oh. I'm going to get another one then. All right. Listen, thank you so much.
Thank you. This has been fun, as it always is. What number is this for me?
This is number 29.
Yeah. 29 appearance. One more to break the all-time record, I guess. No, I think this is like 6, isn't it?
This is 6, I think. Yeah. This is your 6th one. Yeah.
Still, the jacket still hasn't arrived, but I did get a T-shirt though. So
I'm making it myself.
Oh, you're stitching it.
Yeah, I took up sewing over the pandemic.
It's crocheted. I can't wait. Just don't go out in the rain.
It's a sweater jacket. All right, man. Let's get another beer.
Bye, everybody. Sorry to let you in on our personal amusements here about sweater jackets, and just because this is my 6th appearance on No Sleep Till Sudbury, and we joked that I would get a jacket at the 5th appearance, and So now we find out that Brent is weaving it on a loom. So
yeah. Sadly, but truly. I better get to work on that.
Every jacket custom made.
That's right. All right. This has been No Sleep Till Sudbury with Brent Jensen and my very popular guest, Stephen Stanley. All right. Till next time, folks. Take good care.
Brent Jensen is the best-selling author of No Sleep Till Sudbury, Leftover People, and All My Favorite People Are Broken. All titles available in stores and on Amazon worldwide.